Hey everyone, just a quick little reminder before this video starts. On July 15th at 12 PM Eastern Standard Time, I'll be live on the GCX Charity Marathon for 4 hours helping raise money alongside the rest of the marathon attendees for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. If you want to give generously to a cause that I'm sure all of you know and support in your hearts, then you can go ahead and check out gcxevent.com/marathon. And you can find us over on Twitch at twitch.tv/gcxevent. Thanks in advance to all of those of you who are going to show up. I really appreciate it. Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. So, back in the pre-release window for Final Shape, we had this clip from one of the Bungie vidocs talking about the Dread. Take a listen.
The new Dread units, they're using a new language, collaborating with Narrative. We went through and used this constructed language tool to generate different phrases and figure out like grammar structures and other things. The pyramid language that the new Dread units speak is actually translatable. So players, if they're really interested in figuring out what the pyramid units are saying, could decipher these. Kos yen itget, vaktoku vakad.
In hindsight, this only makes me laugh and cry a little because one of the top comments is a joke reaction about how I'm never going to sleep again thanks to trying to figure out the Dread language. Lord knows what's going on with that right now. Hahaha. Let's be real. I'm not a linguist. I am not someone who is in a position to even contemplate trying to figure this out. So I think it is well worth putting that out there before I say anything, and to talk about the process that went through my brain as I was making this video. You see, I'm off script for just a moment, but I wanted to go ahead and make this video today, and as I was writing it, I was realizing that this was not necessarily going to lead to the same kind of concrete answers that I hoped it would. This was something where I picked apart my own theory or my own initial assumption, as I often do in videos, and I just realized that deciphering the language of the Dread is something that will take a long, long time, and it will need to be done in a terrifyingly manual process of gathering each individual phrase, getting them on record, and then trying to figure out what each part of each word, or each phrase, or each sentence, whatever it may be, means. I looked at things initially and found myself attracted to one particular theory which, on further examination, I'm now calling the bad euphony theory. And to put it really simply, whilst it does have a really tantalizing possibility at its core, which I'm still going to explain, and which today's video is still about, I think, on reflection, there are so many problems with this that it's likely never going to lead us anywhere towards deciphering the language of the Dread. So I figured I'd give you that disclaimer first, but regardless, this is still something that's pretty fascinating as far as the lore is concerned, and I want to go ahead and address this because I've stated this theory a few times in the past, and there are a bunch of different holes in this theory, so if I'm going to go ahead and talk about it, I might as well talk about it in the full context of further examination. So, with that in mind, today's video is not going to provide concrete answers on the language of the Dread. Instead, I wanted to address euphony. Also, before we begin, I did want to go ahead and shout out someone on YouTube who has been making some concrete work towards Dread language stuff. In particular, they're making what they're calling the Dread Language Archive. This is a shout out to Pi Na. On YouTube, they've made some steps towards uploading and showing some of the key phrases used by certain Dread enemies. Currently, they've uploaded the Subjugator lines, they've been able to isolate individual phrases, and they're working on Tormentor lines as we go. Still early days, and I'm sure there are other people who have highlighted other phrases, but this is the immediate thing that comes up on YouTube, and I would like to encourage people generally that if you are interested in the Dread language, you can go ahead and do some of this for yourself. All you need is to go ahead and record those lines, collect some of the voice lines for yourself, especially if you're on a PC, and have something like Shadowplay. It's really not too hard to do. So if you are interested in unraveling some of those little bits and pieces of Destiny's Next mystery, yeah, you can take part in this one, and I'm sure you'll be able to find a Discord or a group of people that is looking around within the linguistics of the Dread and is trying to translate them properly. Anyway, let's talk about this euphony thing. To put it really simply, translating the language of the Dread is going to be really tough because we have no context with which to guide us. We need a key of sorts. And this has been the same for some real-life languages, and it brings me to what I think is our closest analog to what I'm going to talk about today, which is the Rosetta Stone. I'm sure some of you know what this is, but for those who don't, the Rosetta Stone is the reason we're able to understand hieroglyphics from ancient Egypt coherently. But what is the Rosetta Stone? Well, it's a massive granite slab, but it's important because it has a decree carved into it, a decree from the time of King Ptolemy V. This is important because the decree needed to be understood by all the residents of Egypt at the time, and as a result, it's written in 3 different languages, one on top of the other, and the translations are pretty close. As a result, this is one of the few moments where we see ancient Greek and hieroglyphic written right next to each other in a near one-to-one translation. And so, it's one of the only sources we have in the modern era that allows us to understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Thus, it means that people from the modern day at very least can read that ancient language, which is pretty awesome, all things considered. The Rosetta Stone isn't perfect, there are large chunks of it missing, but it does still represent one of the greatest linguistic assets in history. So, what if I told you that the lore seems to indicate that there is another kind of Rosetta Stone for some other language that exists in Destiny? Enter the raid exotic from Salvation's Edge, Euphony. This is a staggeringly powerful weapon all on its own, and it has a boatload of potential lore implications tied in with it, stuff that I will hopefully be able to explain in time, but I wanted to read the first couple of lines in its lore tab so you can understand why I'm saying that there is potentially a Rosetta Stone for the Dread out there. The following text was found recessed into a stone wall within the Pale Heart. Translation Protocol has done its best to equate the text to a modern language transcription, with nominal confidence. Words or phrases with 85% translation confidence within the transcript are contained in brackets. Values for bracketed words or phrases are listed after the transcript with percentages indicated in parentheses. So, supposedly, in the Pale Heart, there is a wall which can sort of act as our Rosetta Stone. This theory sounds awesome at first. If we have this little bit of text in Euphony that follows on from what I've just read, and then we can just go ahead and find that wall, suddenly we see the Dread language written in front of us. But that makes a few massive assumptions, and it has a few massive problems. So, let's talk about those before we actually dive into the text. First of all, I don't know if I'm forgetting something obvious or if I've missed something, but thus far, I've personally been unable to find anything within the Pale Heart that resembles the quote recessed wall of text. The text was apparently written into the wall, but in all my time looking around in the raid and the Pale Heart as a destination, I don't think I've seen anything that equates to that. It's entirely possible that I just didn't check in all the right places, and even as I type this, there are some spaces that I certainly know I haven't had a chance to check again. Think of certain sections of the Iconoclast mission where you're fighting the Witness, or various raid encounters and transitional spaces within Salvation's Edge. But still, to the best of my knowledge, the closest thing I've found that has anything even equating to text in the Pale Heart is these. No, not the granite jars in the foreground, but those small pillars behind them. I'll be completely honest, this is something we looked at in the live stream where we went through the Strike liminality, and this is actually where that footage is taken from. These, well, I don't think they're it. Yes, they have text recessed into them, but it's not necessarily the case that it's got enough text there to actually give us the full Euphony lore tab. It's just too small. More importantly, the text itself often is very low poly, which makes me think that this is just someone making fun texture work, as opposed to someone actually trying to write out a message. And then of course there is the further problem, which is that these same objects can be found within Vow of the Disciple, indicating that this is a reused asset and not a bespoke Rosetta Stone type situation. Furthermore, you have the issues implied in the lore. The translation of what was discovered on the wall isn't completely accurate, with some words being completely unknown and with some phrases being made up only of guesswork, which is approximated. You also have the issues that arise when you actually want to translate the transcript of the Euphony lore tab that supposedly came from the wall. Given that we don't actually get a full alphabet from that translation. We do get a lot of letters, but we're still missing J, Q, and Z. So even if we wanted to make a one-to-one alphabet and we found this wall, it would still be incomplete. A basic word such as question would be something we'd never be able to write because we don't have a Q. And then there are the three biggest problems of all, which, well, arise from the fact that the language of the Dread is something that we hear spoken in-game and not written. Firstly, there is the assumption that the language on the wall described in Euphony is the same as the Dread language, which is not guaranteed to be the case. Whilst there is a chance for it if this wall does exist, this could be a language used by the precursors long ago that the Witness also uses. The Dread language could be something completely different. Secondly, there's the assumption that the language of the Dread that we would find on this recessed stone is using a typical alphabet that we would find nowadays. If this is something like the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, then we might have a concrete idea of how to translate the written parts of the Dread language, if it is Dread, but we'd still have no clue of how to say it. Thirdly, even if it is written in a close analog to English as an alphabet, we'd then be making the bold assumption that the spoken phrases are matching the written language perfectly as far as phonetics are concerned. In other words, when the Dread say something along the lines of "Kosyen it get," we'd be assuming that the text used to write that phrase actually looks like what it sounds like in our alphabet. In other words, what you see on screen sounds like what I've said. As for how big of a problem that last one is, I would simply remind you that I've used the word big there, but if I changed the word big to something as simple as large, you'll start to realize that there are tons of words even in English which we spell in a different way from how we actually pronounce them. See the word large written there and how you actually say large? Yeah, you're starting to get my drift. I also think this theory suffers from the big issue again of the wall, because the community is so utterly vast that at this point, if the wall does exist, it's either hidden in plain sight with a remarkable degree of efficacy, or it's just not in the game. The community of Destiny is known for untangling secrets like someone pulling on loose threads of a scarf. Secrets do not tend to persist in Destiny's community for a long time. We mapped the corridors of time, I would remind you, and I think that some of the more prolific secret hunters at this point, people like Scarrow, would have already found a wall like this if it exists. But then again, who knows? Maybe it does exist and we just haven't looked at it. Still, the possibility that it has been missed does exist. I'm never going to say never on that particular front of things, not until we have a definitive translation in our hands. So I guess, whilst we shouldn't stop to try doing the manual process of unknitting the language of the Dread to find out individual verbs, nouns, adjectives, etc., we should still be looking at every other route we can possibly take. So, with all of that said, let's go ahead and read the rest of the Euphony lore tab. This is supposedly what was found on the recessed wall within the Pale Heart. This gives us the quote-unquote top half of our Rosetta Stone. It reads as follows. Transcription starts. We speak so often of knives and violence, but perhaps you would come to understand something softer. Perhaps beingness is instead a golden harp, forged tenderly, a complex, sweeping, beautiful shape with graceful curves and infinite potential. The exemplary unknown. Across its two florid buttresses, the strings of time have been pulled taut, tightened and tuned to a delicate balance of distress. If wound much further, would lead to rupture and sting most unpleasantly. Pluck at any stretched string and vibration reverberates, wavelengths move through atmosphere, producing pleasing, audible experiences. They crest, then fade. If plucked at regular intervals, the waves rise and fall with such charm. This predictability is perfection. It is unmatched. We will compose such sweet music. We will control the ebb and flow. The final shape is the golden harp. and we are the hand that plucks. Transcription ends. Confidence percentages. Softer, 72%. Beingness, 84%. Golden harp, 25%. Unknown, 0%. Buttresses, 46%. Tuned, 77%. Balance of distress, 4%. Rupture, 68%. Vibration reverberates, 18%. Atmosphere, 15%. They crest, then fade, 9%. Plucked, 34%. Sweet music, 37%. Golden harp, 25%. We are the hand that plucks, 2%. Euphony's translation potentially gives us something to work with for certain, and I can't help but feel like the translation percentages at the very end also serve to add a bit of necessary context, but this is all contingent on us finding the stone in the first place and, well, the myriad different problems I mentioned above not getting in the way of what would potentially be a translation from English to the Dread language. And for that matter, this translation would only work for one language back and forth. Remember that the Euphony lore tab is translated into all the different languages that Destiny is localized into, so unless you're literally sitting there and translating across perfectly for each one, the language of the Dread might have different interpretations if you read Euphony in French or Spanish or Portuguese or German. It's very messy. The whole Euphony theory behind this requires a lot of propping up, which is why I wanted to show it to you all today, and to recognize that it is technically speaking a pretty bad theory. It's something which requires holes to be poked in it, and hopefully that's what you guys and gals in the comments section can do today, because this thing is either going to fall apart as the puzzle pieces needed to support it don't fall into place, or alternatively, those puzzle pieces are going to arise, and it's going to be clear that despite all the problems, it is actually just a straight shot. Regardless of which of these happens, the community at large is slowly making progress towards unlocking more of the Dread language. There are whole discords out there getting this sorted on their own, slowly but surely, building up different networks of phrases and finding out how they translate and how they are equivalents of what might be said in English. Someone will eventually crack the code. Whether the Euphony is even tangentially involved or not, it's worth keeping an eye on this. If we do manage to fully translate the Dread language, and it's confirmed by a Bungie developer, I will see about getting a full list of different phrases and translating them all for you. That's my promise to you. For now, I am not going to go ahead and touch this myself. I'm going to let someone who is far better at linguistics figure that out. Look out for the rest of the members of the lore community. They may have their own perspectives and takes, and in something such as this, I think perspectives are valuable. But for now, tell me, can you poke holes in the Euphony theory? I think it's pretty easy to do so. With that in mind, go ahead and give us that context. Show us why it's not necessarily perfect. Or, if miraculously the wall exists and you found it, go ahead and let me know in the comments section as well. That'll be fun to see. Either way, that brings us to the end of the video, and if you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like, and if you have your own thoughts down below in the comments section, I will be looking through them. Also, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe if you want more Destiny lore content. And, as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Per Audacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.